Ducky has formally entered the barebones custom space with the Outlaw65, a very thoroughly kitted barebones gasket mount board that comes with unique looks, unique features for Ducky, and a bold price point of $299 US. Huge shout out and thank you to mechanicalkeyboards.com for sending the Outlaw65 for us to take a look at today. Remember, when you check out there, use creator code TheManicGeek on your way out. It lets them know I sent you, and it sends a little kickback over for the channel. Bear in mind, none of this will color my impressions of this board in any way. As always, links for everything seen in today's video will be down in the description, along with timestamps to bring you right to the stuff that matters the most to you. The keyboard ships flat packed in the case. This was so wild to me to see an 11-piece design that takes do-it-yourself to a whole new level in this hobby. That said, the included case and its packaging all look and feel really premium, so no skimping here. Included extras are something noteworthy since they give you a lot. A nice hard case, a container of lube and a lube brush, a long shank screwdriver with a hollow handle to store extra parts or bits, a palm and an FR4 switch plate, 2 different gasket materials, a nice set of stabilizers, all the pour-on and PE foams, and a basic USB-C cable to get you started. All of these extras lead me to believe this was designed with a newcomer to the hobby in mind. Standard features include south-facing 5-pan hot swap sockets with per-key RGB, gasket mounting with 2 different gasket materials, and a center-mounted USB-C daughter board, which ended up being something of a pain point for building. The layout is sadly locked, so no 7U, split backspace, or step caps love here. But to partially make up for it, there's QMK and VIA compatibility. This is a first for Ducky, and I really hope it's not the last, because QMK and VIA compatibility makes it so much easier to adjust and tune the keyboard on the fly without the need to install any software. The board proper is visually interesting, more so than I expected from Ducky's first foray into the full custom space. We've got a relatively short front height and a typing angle of right around 5 degrees, making this a comfy platform for just about any keycap profile. The angles and edges at play here, used in both aggressive and subtle ways, give the board an engaging look, at least with the silver anno we had for our copy. Sitting in front of it, it even sort of has the impression that it's floating because of that reverse lip out front. While the case is visually very appealing, there are definitely some opportunities to address here. Bear in mind, however, some of what we'll discuss from here on out is partially rooted in personal preference, so your mileage may vary with how much value you place in some of my impressions here. First off, there's seams along the exterior. I don't personally mind visible seams, and for this case it sort of makes sense to me, but you may feel some kind of way about it. Second, the chamfering and alignment of some of the case pieces near the top rear is off by enough that I noticed and can't really unnotice it. It's not the end of the world, but for a $300 bare bones, even considering all the extras, this should have been better overall fit and finish. Third, and this is the most critical bit, the bottom plate for this case is carbon fiber. This is the most interesting choice made for this board, more so even than the multi-piece design itself. This gives the case an aesthetic that's not quite like anything I've ever seen on a keyboard before, evoking something of a futuristic race car vibe. British Racing Green would look really nice here. The problem with carbon fiber on its own is, well... And even with all of the parts fully attached and the board fully assembled, that carbon fiber piece leaves the acoustics feeling sort of squelched, almost muted in a way, unless you're using some kind of foam, be it plate, case, or PE, to return some of that fullness and body to the sound of the keyboard. I think I'd really like to see Ducky offer some different bottom plate materials like PVD steel or brass. Hell, even just aluminum would be nice to get some density back in the case without needing to use foam, and introducing us to potentially some different and more unique aesthetics. A few things to note about board assembly. First, if you use the silicone gaskets, the otherwise really good directions tell you to align the gaskets on the plate so the thick side faces up. This is not advised, as it makes the board sound even more squelched and feel less bouncy, so unless that's your intent when building, avoid this and set the thick side of the gaskets down to give a bit more room behind the PCB for both acoustics and bounce. You also want to be careful with the aforementioned USB-C daughter board, as it's connected via the saddest JST connector I think I've ever seen. Not only is this thing stupendously short, it's also really stiff, being largely enclosed in heat shrink. The end result ultimately ends up being that when you install the USB-C daughter board, PCB and plate assembly, and JST connector at the same time, you end up sort of having to squish the JST connector in such a way that it feels like it's putting a lot of pressure and tension on both the cable and the connectors on the board, and that just doesn't feel very comfy. So as a future revision for this board, I think I would like to see a longer JST cable for the USB-C daughter board, just so it's less stressful on the parts, the cable, and ultimately the end user. For our final build, we ended up using the palm plate, silicone gaskets with no tab underneath the spacebar, case foam, J-Wick blacks lubed with 205 grade 0 and spring swap to 58 gram Tech C slow springs, and DCX emerald. Originally, we were also supplied some Cherry MX2A reds and new Cherry profile Ducky keycaps to try out, but those didn't really go over too well for this build, so we're going to try them on some other boards before passing final judgment on those in separate content. Links are in the description if you want to check them out in the meantime. The included stabs were a breath of fresh air, carrying nice, tight tolerances that only required a small amount of the included lube to get them tuned properly. On the subject of the lube, I'm not actually sure what it is, but they give you a lot of it, and a brush to use to apply it. It looks like it's somewhere between 205 G0 and G-Lube and behaves as such, so a little bit goes a long way here. Let's take a listen to what the board ended up sounding like. The other weekend, I actually brought this board along with me to a local keyboard meetup and had some chats with some folks there about what they thought about this keyboard. Among initial impressions was this question: why is this board's case so many pieces? That had to take up more machine time than making a more traditional case, and the use of the carbon fiber bottom plate definitely doesn't seem to help things acoustically. On display next to it was my Moda Envoy, which, as optioned, costs about the same as Outlaw65, sans the second plate to build with and the included lube, but otherwise having everything else. Most guesses at the cost of the Outlaw65 had it well below the $299 MSRP, usually hovering in and around the $130 to $150 range because, well, it's Ducky. When comparing the two boards, the general consensus was that while we'd be more likely to pay for Envoy than Outlaw65, there is some brand recognition stuff at play relative to the price points we're discussing, as well as a relative quality difference in that the Envoy just cleans up more nicely than Outlaw65 does, if only just so. Like the Spanish Inquisition before, no one expected this, least of all for it to cost as much as it does, or for it to be a, dare I say it, very nearly really nice board. The only thing really holding it back from being truly on par with its price-adjacent contemporaries is a bit of overall refinement in the case and, subjectively speaking, acoustics. Everything else about the package is really nice, so where does that leave us with Outlaw65? To me, the price isn't really all that bad considering what you're getting with the board and its bill of materials. It's just not the sort of price point you expect to see a Ducky board hanging out around in, so that alone may turn off some buyers from the board. But really outside of a few small refinement and acoustic issues, the board as a total package is way nicer than I expected, and I really had to start nitpicking this thing to find much wrong with it. In general, if you're a newer enthusiast who's looking for a higher end custom that's got high quality extras and you vibe with the aggressive looks, then the Ducky Outlaw 65 might be worth considering. For me, I am really excited to see Ducky starting to offer boards like this one here, and I'm honestly really excited to see what else the Project D line of keyboards has to offer. In particular, form factors. I personally would love to see a TKL that looks something like what the Outlaw 65 does. But sound off below, what do you think of Outlaw 65, and what other form factors would you like to see Ducky come out with? Sound off in the comments below. Once again, huge shout out and thank you to mechanicalkeyboards.com for sending the Outlaw 65 over for us to take a look at today. Remember, the links for everything you've seen in today's video are down in the video's description. Make sure you're following us on socials so you don't miss any channel updates. Make sure you're following us here and on Twitch. Again, links down in the video's description. And while you're at it, check out these other videos mechanicalkeyboards.com helped us make. And as always, we'll catch you in the next one.